Hey there, my name's Elaina Battista-Parsons when I publish. And I'm the author of Italian Bones in the Snow, published by Vine Leaves Press on 2/22/22, so it's only been out a few months. And they are an indie press, you can check them out. So I guess I started with that to show you, I'm kind of sort of qualified to teach you this class, but there's always more to learn, and this is just my experience. I'm also part of Inked in Gray. I have a YA, that will be my debut YA novel called Black Licorice, hopefully sometime late this year, probably early next year. So I kind of write across genres. I'm also the editor at Vine Leaves Press for their 50 Give or Take digital publication, which is a microfiction. Highly encourage you to submit. Microfiction newsletter that's put out every single day, and you can get your piece published. So you can find me at vineleavespress.com under 50 Give and Take. So nonfiction is where I seem to do my work a little bit quicker, a little more naturally. So when I saw that WriteHive was looking for presentations, I thought, okay, so it's nonfiction. I have so much more to learn in fiction. And thanks to my editor, Dakota, shout out at Inked in Gray, I have learned a lot more about writing fiction. But nonfiction memoir comes a little bit easier. So here I am to teach you about writing your memoir in digestible slices, not thinking of it as this arduous, tedious, mountain high task. If you break it into smaller pieces, you'll eventually have a book. This one happens to be essays and poetry, but I just finished a first draft on a 70,000 word all prose. So that experience has led me to, you can't see them, my note cards and what I'm about to show you. My first piece of advice is this: a notebook on the passenger side seat. Because if it's there and you're at a light and you have a pen, you can scribble your notes. Oh my gosh, that's right. Jimmy Watkins in 6th grade said this to me and I freaked out. These things happen when we're driving around our town. We think of these strange moments in our life. If you don't have somewhere to write it, I don't recommend texting it when you're in the car. If you're at a baseball game, text yourself, but have that notebook. That notebook will always be there, and you can have a 4,000 word essay from one line about Jimmy Watkins in 6th grade smelling like garlic. Charlie, shh, sorry about my dog. He might bark, but you'll love him. I might bring him over soon. So the notebook. My other piece of advice, when you get started on this memoir, forget your timeline at first. Because these memories from your life, or a portion of your life, are going to come in dribs and drabs. They're not going to come in order. I think that is one of the biggest obstacles with a lot of writers. We feel the need, well, at least I do sometimes, to write chronologically. I've gotten over that. Get rid of the chronology, it will come later. In fact, my editor at Vine Leaves was the one who said, maybe when we publish this, we should have some sort of order to it, because it was everywhere. So don't worry about the timeline. If you want to write about college years first, and then nursery school another day, it's going to be all over the place. Now again, it all depends on how you're going to format it. And if you're going to do it in this vignette sort of essay style, it doesn't matter. No one's going to know how you did your first draft. So forget your timeline. And now I'm going to get down to the nitty gritty about how to sort of motivate yourself, and maybe even give you some prompts that are universal prompts that before you know it, if you use some of these prompts, you're going to have a collection. And it could either be a smaller chapbook, tons of presses, I love a chapbook. It could be a full length, or it could be a medium length. This is about 27,000 words. I kind of consider this somewhere in the middle. I'm gonna let my dog out. So do or don't. Either you do it full or don't do it. And I have little notes on these cards to remind me what to tell you about what I mean by that, to explain what my do or don't strategy is. When I was 17, I developed really disgusting warts on my already not so great looking fingers. They were across every single finger in the cuticles because I worked with produce in a country store. And we would put the wet produce away at night. And so I developed really bad warts. And I wrote about it in this. In a more interesting context of dating someone who made me stop hiding them. I would wear Band-Aids, tape, gloves. This was in college, senior year into college, because it lasted 2 years. And either you write fully and transparently about something that vulnerable or traumatic, or you don't. That's my advice. Don't do it halfway, because if you do it halfway, your readers will know, and maybe the connection won't be there, and they'll call you out and in their mind, and it's not as authentic. So if you're going to do something, and there's way more trauma than warts, but for me, it was everywhere. I was a performer. It was awful. I went all the way and I dove in and I wrote fully. So do or don't. I think so. I mean, I think there's topics that are so serious that need to be written in second person. It's too hard to do it first person. So you take your time and you do it that way. But if you really want the connection and the honesty, go all the way. It'll help you and your reader. That weird thing. You're going to write about that weird thing. And my note is Mork. I am 45, and there was a show called Mork and Mindy in the 1980s, and Mork was played by Robin Williams. And I had a doll in the 80s. I was 6 years old, and I would carry Mork around and say he was my husband. It's not in Italian Bones in the Snow, but it's in my new memoir. And that's my weird thing from my childhood. There's more, but find that weird thing. You know, risk being judged, risk being looked at like, because it's the weird that makes the good stuff. So do the weird. In the memoir, I talk about where I took Mork, why I took Mork. Then it started leading me into other topics. So when you find that weird thing, it's going to branch out into other things. I started talking about relationships and how I always wanted to be a couple with another human being. I always wanted to be with a companion. For me personally, I was boy crazy. So for me personally, that kind of was the beginning of my boy crazy, even though he was an 18-inch doll, and you'd pull a string and he'd go, nanu, nanu. That's weird. That was my weird thing. Write about the time you went too far. When did you go too far? As you can see, I have items on the lawn. When I was 19, I called my mom from my boyfriend's house, asked if I could stay over. It was late. I come from kind of strict parents. Actually, and when I say kind of, they really weren't horribly strict, but strict enough that I was not allowed, while living under their roof, to sleep at my boyfriend's house. Well, all I had to do was ask. I did come home because they said no, and everything in my room was on my lawn. That's how mad my mom was that I even asked. So a time you went too far. A friend, a parent, a spouse, a sibling. And I hope you're jotting these notes down because these are the prompts. The weird thing, when did you go too far? When you should have left, but you didn't. That's my car. And I wrote Jenks. See, I'm from the Jersey Shore. So Jenkinson's Pavilion had bands and it's a nightlife. And I should have left when my dear friend joined me, and at the time my first husband, to go see a band, and she'd forgotten her license. And instead of leaving with her, I went in without her and dissed her. I don't even think I was married to him yet. That was shitty. So write about the time that you should have left, but you didn't. So you made a mistake. Maybe you're at a party. It doesn't matter. Just, I think that kind of prompt creates tension. It has potential for a narrative that gives the reader that feeling of did they leave or not? And so you want that. It keeps them reading. So I think that's a really good prompt. I like that one. What makes you tired? What did I write down there? Scratchy voices. I'm very sensory. And I talk a lot about that in my newest, the drafted piece, my full length. Scratchy voices always made me feel so like tired and like I just had to get out of there. And I don't know, it's a thing about the sound hitting my brain. And it just makes me so tired. Stores that don't open till 10 a.m. that makes me tired. Like, open up earlier. Like, some of us are morning people. Friendships, some friendships, you know, those friendships that make you so tired after you talk to them. And bad books. Bad writing makes me tired. Another good prompt, think about what makes you tired. Turn it into an essay. The time I interned for Ben at MTV. And I put at the bottom a professional conversational piece, something that happened in one of your professional situations. I think it's always nice to include one of those in a memoir piece. I interned at MTV for a month in the summer of '98, and on the last day of my internship, they didn't tell us who, but they said, who wants to be an intern for our visiting producer who's here? And so I raised my hand and I got picked, and it was for Ben Stiller. And I got to spend the day getting his lunch. And actually, he was very kind. When I brought his lunch back, he said, oh yeah, you're right. I said crackers and seltzer. Well, oh my gosh, what's your name? Elaina. Elaina, can you go back and get me some low carb crackers? I'm gonna be on TV. Well, maybe you should have told me that, Ben, before I went out and got the crackers in the first place. So these kind of stories, you know, a professional situation. It doesn't have to be as exciting as Ben Stiller, but I think the workplace has a lot of potential, but don't fill your memoir. That's one of those digestible slices. I have patches of, and I drew my beloved strawberry, and I have on the bottom the Malinowskis. Those were my neighbors when I was a kid, and they had a strawberry patch. So this is kind of literal, but I put this because the prompt is thinking about that place in your childhood, whether it's a neighborhood, a school, a building, an alleyway, a street, and just you remember the surroundings so well. I remember the Malinowski strawberry patch because it was the first one I had ever seen. I had never seen a strawberry patch, and I love strawberries so much, and I never knew how green they started. So it was kind of this, oh, that's what they look like at first. Oh, it's on the side of a house, and they grow low, and they grow all over each other, and there's vines. So this is the prompt for that time that you discovered something that kind of blew your mind as a kid, maybe as a teen. Say it, but don't say it, you know? And then I have Windex, because in Italian Bones in the Snow, my opening story is all about how my mom would break my spirit as a kid when I would Windex the windows in our family room before company. But I never said she made me so sad. So it's important to find those moments where you can find a real emotion from your life, but never say it. And we should do this. I mean, look, we do this as writers all the time, showing it, and instead of telling it, it's not rocket science. However, in a memoir, I really think that those kind of pieces are really intriguing and relevant and important to include. You know, when we really were either broken or raised or elevated or smushed down, and never actually say those words. Just show it. And hopefully I do in that. Dreams. But I don't just mean, I dreamt that I was on an elevator with Christopher Walken and we had a conversation. I mean the weird stuff. And I have clay written at the bottom. When I was young, I'd have this reoccurring dream when I'd fall asleep in the afternoon after like a long day at the beach. And I dreamt about boulders being stacked up and made of clay. And I had to hold them up with like wood. But I don't know what it meant. Maybe it was some kind of stress. So the dreams that reoccur that have that textural thing about them, that's a great prompt. We all have them. I'm often now in my adult years in a hotel in my dreams, and I can never find my room. And this dream pops up all the time. Dreams. Oh, look, I drew Mork from Orc. A time you were mortified. We all have them. And in the corner, I have Matt. When I was in middle school, I had a massive crush on this guy, Matt. Massive. And one of the other guys in the class, like, Elaina, someone has a crush on you. I know it, but I can't. And then it got loud, and our teacher, I don't know, we were in the hallway, and we were walking to the next class. And I wanted to know, and I didn't get to hear who. And so he mouths this. And my heart just bursted in glitter, you name it, as the 7th grader with such a crush. And I was so happy all day. And then later that night, I was talking to my best friend about it, and she's like, oh, can you believe Pat has a crush on you? I'm like, Pat? He said, Matt. And he's like, no, I asked him, and it's not Matt, it's Pat. And I just crumbled right there in a puddle. I was mortified because I had to tell her the truth, and I was mortified because that whole rest of the day, I kind of acted a certain way around Matt. Oh, middle school, I hated it. Slices. Another prompt. Food, but not description. Okay, so my husband's funny because I write about food a lot. He's like, I don't really enjoy reading about food so much. You write about it a lot. I love your other stuff, but like enough about the food. And I really started thinking about it, that it's not the description of food as so much the ritual behind whatever it is I was eating that brings the reader in more. So like 1 or 2 lines of description is enough. You know, the smothered piece of chicken with the capers and lemon and garlic, and the dousing and the shavings of Parmesan, and that's great for like 2 sentences, but talk about why you're writing about that food. What is it about that food? I have a piece in Italian Bones called Veal over Polenta, but it's not really about the veal and the polenta. It's about the time with my grandmother and her veiny hands and the smell of her skin and our bonding and talking about things that I knew she wouldn't be around to see. In my life, though she lived long, she didn't get to see them. And so it's really just about our friendship. And so I think food is a gateway to really great memoir essays, but don't make the whole 2 pages about the description of the delicious lobster bisque. You know, 1 or 2 sentences about the velvety nature, and then you're good. Oh, I love this one. Doodle to dig. Because like everyone else, I get massive writer's block, and then I have to pull out my colored pencils and my Sharpie. It's kind of an example of what you're seeing as I'm holding up these cards. Now I have to let Charlie in. 1 second. I find that breaking from writing, I'm not an artist, as you can tell, but a nice doodle and just the act of doing it and the coloring in can sometimes recharge your batteries and also kind of remind you of what it is you're trying to say. And it might not work for all of you. Some people turn to other things, sewing, exercise. I read something somewhere that someone who wrote a really beautiful memoir, she ran every day for a year and wrote. So she only ran and she wrote. So maybe that would be your thing. But I find doodling to dig helps. Setting up a sprint for yourself. Time yourself for 10 minutes and write that memory. Charlie, come here. Come here. So Melanie Conklin, she's a middle grade author that I really admire. She's the first person I ever heard talk about a sprint and setting that timer to write for 10 minutes is no joke. A.S. King does it too. And it might be complete nonsense, but you'll find some gold in it, and you'll find the parts of that sprint that you can turn into an essay. Childhood books. This was my favorite and first book as a kid that I was obsessed with. It's It's a really old book by Alison Martin Provenson. If you can remember old titles from when you were a kid, find them on eBay, find them on Amazon, and order them. You will be shocked at how that can excavate some memories and get you to really write something that you've forgotten about completely. And then, of course, my beloved Golden Girls and Miami. So what does that have to do with writing these slices of your life? The plot. Watch just about any episode. And not only the writing will help you to write, but if you watch for the small things like what is it about the episode that draws us in? Is it them in their bathrobes in their kitchen, that cozy feeling? I think it can add texture to our essays when we figure out from a show so well written and so ahead of its time like this, what it is in the story and in the details that we can add on our own. Is it just a simple line of dialogue? Sophia said in one episode recently, she said, I can't put my finger on it, but if I could, I'd have to wash it first. Wash it after. I'd have to wash it after. And just from that, it got me thinking about writing an essay about something that's really like vulgar and just disgusting from my child. Things I remember kids doing in school, like digging into their nose and eating it, though that's the good stuff that makes an essay real. I got my little cemetery because as a child, my bedroom window overlooked a cemetery and there's a story about it. So find the love of your bizarre. What did you love that was bizarre as a kid? I love cemeteries, my Mork from Ork doll. It's kind of like find your weird, but this is more of what sort of enchanted you that was bizarre and maybe not everybody can say. So there's cemeteries. Also those from the cap guns, those pink strips that you could snap along the edge of something. They often went in the cap gun. The smell of after it was burned was something I loved. When you're writing your memoir, think about times you felt justified, when you found your people in your life. I think these essays are inspiring, these kind of memoir slices, because it makes it more relatable and not just about your life. I think it's really important when you're writing a memoir or essays that are nonfiction about your life to give the reader really something to hang on to. I mean, obviously we all want to connect with our writing. So maybe a time you felt justified to give the reader hope that your people are out there. And if you're feeling alone, hang on, you will find them. I have found them in the writing community online. I haven't met half of the people that I've connected with in person. And I wonder sometimes if I even have to. I'd love to. I've met some wonderful writers along the way in this journey, and they've made me feel validated and justified. And so maybe writing about that, there's something in that too that can give your memoir just a little more boost of humanity. And then I have amplified. Don't be afraid to amplify the truth. Don't lie, but amplify it. There's an essay in Italian Bones called Wintered Earth, and it is the best to my memory, but I know I amplified it with some imagery and some human interaction that definitely happened, but perhaps the dialogue wasn't exact, and I just turned it up a notch. It's your piece. If it happened, it happened. If you need to spice it up a little and just elevate it with a little bit more zhuzh, then do it. Before I leave you, I'm going to pull a tree card for you. As sort of something to encourage you and inspire you for the rest of the day. I pulled the ginkgo tree for you, which is joy. You know what? Have fun with your memoir. When you're writing it in these slices, have fun with it. If you're writing about something very difficult and traumatic, you're not going to have fun with it. But definitely find any joy you can to sort of balance the trauma. We all have it. We all have been through things, all of us at different degrees. There's a spectrum of trauma. And I think it's important to balance a memoir with everything. Trauma, joy, pain, exhaustion, weird, bliss, learning, humanity, dogs. I hope I've helped. Again, this was my journey. When I wrote this, it came out fast and furiously. Not all of them come out that way. My second one did not. My second one really required me to talk to some family members and dig a little deeper into family research and who else might have had sensory issues, because that's what it's really about. And then I started realizing, as I'm writing these small slices out of order, that some of the memories weren't exactly about my sensory issues, but within the narrative, naturally there were, if that makes sense. So I didn't think, okay, when did I have sensory issues with touch or temperature? I didn't do it there. I just thought of situations. And then as I'm writing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a time where I was like so hot that I was gonna pass out, and it was not hot in the room, but it was my own sensory regulation issue. So I wish you joy in writing your memoirs, and you can reach me on Instagram as e.battista77 or ElainaParsons77 @gmail. That's pretty easy. 77 is the year I was born. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your WriteHive presentations and panels. And I'm going to try and pop in as much as I can that weekend. I will be at our town's LGBTQ Pride Day, which is why I did a recording and not an actual panel. And I hope that you are able to check out my book if you can, and to write about your life, write your truth. Have a wonderful day.